Hello fellow aviators, Angelo Dube welcoming you back to the channel where we discuss all things aviation. Today we are discussing fake pilot licenses. Yep, you heard me right. Fake pilot licenses. Why are we asking this question now? Because you remember that in May 2020, a Pakistani airliner went down after the second attempt to land it was not properly handled by the pilots flying it. These opened, a can of worms for Pakistan, because it then transpired that over 40% of its pilot licenses are actually fake or dubious. Today we actually discuss that incident and what it means for aviation in general. So on 22 May 2020, an Airbus A320 left Lahore to Karachi in Pakistan, where it eventually crashed upon attempting a second landing. 8 crew and 89 passengers perished. There were only 2 survivors. Now, preliminary reports point towards pilot error for this particular accident. Unfortunately or fortunately, this incident pierced the veil and opened the world to possibilities of fraud in the Pakistani pilot licensing system. It transpired that at least 1 in 3 Pakistani pilots actually possesses a fake license. Now, this prompted the Pakistani International Airlines to immediately suspend 150 of their 450-something pilots. And also, information started coming out that out of the 860-something licenses in Pakistan, about 260 of those were actually fake. Some news houses actually placed the number of fake licenses in Pakistan at 40%. That is a huge figure. It's very alarming indeed for a country to actually have such high figures of fraudulent licenses. The preliminary reports into this matter show that pilot error was at play in this particular accident. The pilots seem to have started their descent very late and therefore were not properly established on their approach for runway 25. And when they attempted to land the first time, it seems from eyewitness accounts that they had not extended the landing gear, so that when they touched down on the runway for the first time, actually what the aircraft did was to scrape the runway surface with both engines. Of course, inflicting so much damage on those engines, but the damage did not take hold until they had gone around and were in the air and attempting to come back again for a second attempt at landing, when both engines began to cut out one after the other. And from then on, it just went south. They descended, they lost altitude, and eventually they crashed. But what's alarming is that the preliminary reports show that while ATC was trying to alert them to their dangerously low altitude, they probably didn't want to listen to those instructions, and they seem to be fixated on discussing corona. In a time when the cockpit was in crisis, they were discussing issues such as corona, when they were supposed to be focusing on the goal at hand and landing that aircraft safely. So this then, began to bring questions about the suitability of Pakistani pilots, or their safety and their competence in the cockpit. And indeed, it came to light that over 40% of their pilots are actually fake pilots. Of course, this prompted other countries to start grounding Pakistani pilots. Vietnam decided to ground all Pakistani pilots who were flying in their airspace. The EU decided to do the same thing, grounding all Pakistani pilots, and so did the United Arab Emirates. And the UN also removed Pakistan International Airlines from their list of preferred vendors because of the safety issues that were there. But what does it mean to have a fake pilot license? Does this mean the person sat down on a computer and using Photoshop decided to create their own pilot license? Does it mean this person went to some shady sticky fingers guy at the taxi rank and then he bought his license? Not necessarily. I mean, these are pilots who have gone through their training. They have done the flight hours necessary. They have done the tests necessary. They've done the simulator training necessary. They've been trained by the airline itself on the airline simulator, on the standard operating procedures for the airline, etc., etc. But the problem with the Pakistani system is that there is no oversight at their CAA where pilots write their theoretical exams. So there is so much fraud, there's so much corruption that because remember, For aviation, the passing mark is 75%. You need to get at least 75%. And those subjects are extremely difficult. So what these Pakistani pilots do is to get someone else to go and sit for their exams. So they pay someone to go and write the exams for them. Meaning that when it comes to the theoretical knowledge, they may be able to fly the aircraft practically. They know when to select what. But when they need to apply the theory now to a developing situation in the cockpit and be able to know what will transpire, if the aircraft does this, what will come next, and what to avoid and what to do, they may be lacking in that regard because they never really passed the theoretical exam. They got someone else to write it for them. Hence, their pilot license is considered to be fake. Now, what are the effects of such a finding, a damning finding that 40% of pilot licenses from Pakistan are actually fake? Now, there's quite a lot of negatives that come from this. For instance, there's that reputational risk that there may be pilots in Pakistan who did things the right way. They were able to sit for exams and write them. They were able to go through all the processes. There was no fraud involved in them obtaining their licenses. But right now, the industry is looking at Pakistani pilots as tainted licenses because, after all, corruption is so widespread there. You can actually get a license by fraudulently asking someone to sit and write your exams for you. So that's one way in which this thing will affect aviation. Now, restrictions have already been placed on Pakistani pilots by, like I said, the likes of United Arab Emirates, the likes of Vietnam, who have grounded all Pakistani pilots because, it's dodgy. Safety issues demand, or safety considerations demand that they be grounded because of the likelihood that their licenses are probably forged. Those are some of the effects that this thing will actually bring about. Now, has this ever happened elsewhere? Of course, this has happened. There are other places where fake pilots exist, and is that, I think, the scale at which the Pakistani fake pilot saga is at is too high, it's too deep, it's too widespread. It has tentacles everywhere. And how could this be a possibility? How did it happen? It talks to lack of oversight at their CAA because, for instance, in the South African context, if you're going to write an exam at the CAA, number one, there will be a video recording of your writing station. Throughout your writing process, you will be under surveillance. That recording will be kept somewhere. So if one has to verify if indeed it was you that wrote the exam, that video recording can be pulled, and a visual confirmation of whether it was you or not can be done. But secondly, also, you have to present your license at the CAA. If you don't have your license, you may not be able to write, because how do we confirm it's you? You have to present your license before the CAA personnel, who confirm the license number and the personal details on that license before you are admitted into the examination room. But I guess for one to circumvent that, as it happened in the Pakistani situation, then there has to be a level of corruption where the person who has been tasked with confirming and verifying candidates before they write actually takes a bribe and allows the person to go in and sit for that exam. Now, the other system is which the CAA in South Africa did was to actually stop or cancel a long-standing practice of walk-in examination. So you just walk in and ask, do you guys have an open slot? And if they do, can I write? Then you sit down and write. So that you have to book your exams in advance. You fill in a form. It has all your details. You pay the necessary fees. Exam is scheduled by CAA, and you present yourself on the date and time of the exam, and your identity and your license are verified at that particular point, and then you are searched as you go into the exam room so that you do not carry with you smart gadgets that could perhaps be used to record or to give you information. And then as you sit down throughout your writing process, the cameras are actually focusing on you and recording your every movement and ensuring that it's you that's sitting there and writing. So that's what South Africa has done to curb any possibility of someone doing it the Pakistani way, just getting a license for free. But be that as it may, we have had issues, or at least let's say one case in South Africa of a fraudulent pilot flying for South African Airways. I think his matter is in court now. A criminal case of fraud is pending in court. The last time I checked, what he did was he got his commercial pilot license, qualified for that, joined South African Airways in the 1990s, worked his way up. When it came time for him to be promoted to captain, at which point he would have to produce his airline transportation pilot license in 2005, he declined the promotion, which looks rather bizarre for someone to decline seniority in that way. But it later turned out that the fella had actually, cooked his ATPL. He didn't have it. He only had a CPL, but presented to the company and said that he had the airline transportation pilot license, which he never had. When the scandal broke out, African Airways asked the guy to resign. Asked him to resign. Didn't fire him, asked him to resign, which is kind of crazy for someone who came to the company and said, I have an ATPL. It's the same as coming to a company and say, I have a doctorate. And when in all you have is a higher certificate in law, and you go to the company and say, actually, I'm a doctor of laws, I have a doctorate in law. That's what basically this guy did. But he was asked to resign, and he resigned, but the criminal case is ongoing in court. Now, that's the one scandal that stands out in the South African sense. It's not necessarily at the same level as the Pakistani situation, where 40% of the pilots are actually carrying fake licenses, and it points to lack of oversight by their CAA. At least in the South African instance, you could perhaps tell that lack of oversight was there within the company itself where this pilot was working, not necessarily within CAA. Because, he told the company that he had an ATPL. And, and he produced something that was totally fake. He had cooked it up himself. I don't know why the company didn't pick it up. I don't know, year on year, why were they not asking for further documents? It just boggles my mind. But that's the closest we've come to this scandal in South Africa. So that's it on the Pakistani fake pilot license scandal. We are awaiting the final report of the Pakistan International Airlines Airbus A320 crash. It's going to come out, I think, in the next 2 months or so. We will see what they say there. But it was clear after the crash that the focus on fake licenses in Pakistan was heightened, and that Pakistan really needs to clean its house. There needs to be prosecution of corrupt elements there. There needs to be focused and intentional moves towards fortifying their licensing procedures there if Pakistani is to come out of this particular scandal. Because everywhere you go in the world now, I wouldn't be, safe flying with a Pakistani trained pilot. I hope that was an informative episode, and if it was, please do click the like button below and do not forget to subscribe. It's the only way we can grow this channel. It's the only way we can reach out to potential aviators out there to show them that it's possible. Dear African child, you can actually ascend to the cockpit if you put your mind to it and you're willing to put in the work. And to remember that with every hour the cockpit beckons, so keep on adding those hours. Until next time, Angela Dube urging you to stay safe and to stay masked up because of COVID-19, and cheers.